Gary Douglas est le président et CEO de la North Country Chamber of Commerce, qui est basée à Plattsburgh, et qui est aussi un partenaire majeur dans la mise en place de ces corridors de commerce. Nous le rencontrons dans un instant à COREX. So, Mr. Douglas, welcome to COREX TV.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
And let's start with the explanation of the relationship between North Country and Montreal and Quebec province. In 2001, the North Country Chamber of Commerce and la Fédération des chambres de commerce du Québec signed this agreement, the Quebec-New York Corridor Agreement.
Yes.
Could you tell us what it is about and also explain its importance?
Well, it built upon some collaboration that had been going on in the years immediately prior to that, related to the border at Champlain, getting new border facilities constructed. We made some real progress on that front by 2001, and it just seemed to make sense to us to start collaborating in the many elements of the cross-border relationship that we needed to work together on, technology sectors and transportation investments and other elements. And our two organizations drafted at that time. My good friend Michel Audette was president of what was then the Chamber of Commerce of Quebec, to lay out a vision, certainly identifying several areas of opportunity for cooperation, but really starting to recognize that what was already happening and has continued to happen between Quebec and New York, in a broader sense between Canada and the U.S., but particularly between Quebec and New York, a more integrated economic zone and increasingly a common binational economic region from Quebec City and Montreal through Plattsburgh to Albany and New York, within which there's still a border, which is an inconvenience we have to manage, but which no longer really is defining regionality in terms of economics, who people do business with, how their supply chains are configured, how money and people kind of move, who people intermarry with. I'm married to someone from Beaconsfield, very common thing in the North Country. That we really are increasingly a common region. We therefore need to strategize and plan and cooperate together more.
So the relationship existed before, but the idea was to tighten this relationship.
Yes.
And to expand it.
And to expand it to all of the elements that you would think of if you were thinking of a common economic region. So we have fostered partnerships in various technology sectors between New York and Quebec, for example.
But you just told that there is an issue sometimes, the border. Mm-hmm. How much of an issue is this border in trying to build a cross-border business these days?
Well, in the late 1990s, certainly as a result of the acceleration of commercial activity in both directions at the border post-NAFTA, there had been almost a tenfold increase in volume in both directions, going up Auto Route 15, Interstate 87. Yet the facilities were basically what had been built for Expo 67. I mean, they didn't look much different. They really had never been redesigned to accommodate huge volumes of commercial traffic. And there was no political will on either side to make border investments. It just wasn't something that either government was doing. And so some will recall that by the late 1990s, as truck traffic, particularly on, for example, Sunday evenings, which is the peak time each week, we were getting backups of 10 and 15 miles. 10 and 15 miles.
Can you imagine the time being spent
of trucks sitting there on the road, waiting almost the entire evening to get through Champlain. And then, of course, you don't turn a high-speed highway into a truck parking lot and not start to have tragic things happen. We had a couple of serious accidents with trucks colliding into the back of the line. You know, you're in a rural area, there's no traffic, you're just kind of cruising down the highway and suddenly there's a truck in front of you. We marshaled the political will in Washington at that point to finally identify Champlain as a high priority border crossing for U.S. investment going forward. And then with a broad coalition on both sides of the border, made the case for what we termed a vision for a port of excellence, not a port of entry. That what we wanted to create between Quebec and New York at Champlain was the most flexible, the most expansive, the most secure, but also the most efficient gateway on the entire U.S.-Canadian border.
And did you succeed?
We did succeed. $170 million can do amazing things. It's amazing what you can do with $170 million. We leveraged $170 million with the help of people like our senators at the time, Hillary Clinton and Charles Schumer, and then fought to make sure the bean counters didn't cut anything out of that $170 million. We had good cooperation from the Quebec government at that time to help build a new truck crossing just north of the border and to do some other things north of the border to help everything work the way we needed it to work. And what Quebec now has, because of our cooperation through this arrangement, is the premier commercial crossing on the entire U.S.-Canadian border. The reportable truck delays at Champlain are zero. So they can talk all they want in Ontario and other places about the thickening of the border and, oh, woe be us, you know, commercial activity is being slowed down. Not at Champlain. Now we have to keep an eye on it, and we do. But we were able, with cooperation, a vision, and then extraordinary investment to build our way out of the problem.
So the traffic flows easier these days, and that's good. And Plattsburgh likes to refer to itself as the Montreal U.S. suburb.
That's right.
We've been hearing that. What does that mean precisely?
Well, it's part of what it's part of this whole notion of changing the mindset and erasing that border when it's really not relevant to many things that we're thinking about going forward. If you are Plattsburgh and you are an hour outside of Dallas or Chicago or San Francisco, we would automatically think of ourselves as being part of that metropolitan region.
Of course.
And they would think of ourselves as being part of that metropolitan region. Yet here we sit an hour out of Montreal, and the old parochial thinking of Americans is, well, we can't be part of something that's not in our own country. Yet we are. We are Montreal's U.S. suburb. It certainly began through the years and continues as suburbs are, that place where people from the city recreate and shop and have second homes and keep their boats and play golf and do all those things. But we also have become, which is strategically important for Montreal, in particular Quebec in general, an important corporate suburb for the Quebec business community. As it grows in the U.S. market and as part of growth, not relocation, needs some U.S. presence as well as special services on the other side of the border. We're filling that role.
And what do you see when talking about that, in fact, as being the nicest opportunities, the best opportunities as sectors of activity?
Well, certainly one that has grown rapidly over the last 12, 15 years is transportation equipment. Bombardier, Nova Bus, Prevost are now manufacturing or at least finishing equipment in Plattsburgh for the U.S. market. Those are the ones everybody knows, the big names. There are probably about 20 others, all Quebec companies doing various types of transportation equipment or transportation equipment components, who also now are using Plattsburgh as their platform to be a supplier in the U.S. market.
And if I was to ask you a quick conclusion, what would be the key ingredients to build success, to be successful actually in these times?
Teamwork and not making mistakes. And we have really focused on that. One of the things, if I talk to colleagues from around the U.S. and I say where I'm from, one of the first things they usually ask, oh, you're near Montreal, you must spend a lot of time working with your companies to export to Canada. And I say, you know, I've been there 23 years and we have never done that. We go up and work with Quebec companies to help them export to the U.S. and their heads explode because they can't comprehend why a U.S. Chamber of Commerce is helping businesses in another country, you know, export back to our country. Well, it's because we're Montreal's U.S. suburb. What is good for Quebec, what's good for Montreal is good for Plattsburgh. Full stop, that's the reality. The success of Quebec companies who do nothing locational in our area, and the vast majority don't, but let's say they're being very successful selling widgets in Texas and they're producing them in Drummondville. Well, that's probably coming through Champlain, and it needs to be serviced by customs brokers, and then it needs a whole range of other services in the U.S. market, attorneys and accountants and banking relationship, maybe visas for personnel, and they need advice on that. All insurances. We have developed a specialization in our service community, a hub, if you will, specific to helping Quebec companies succeed in the U.S. market. And we regularly, as part of a partnership with the Montreal Board of Trade and its World Trade Center that actually goes back even before our partnership with the FCCQ, several times a year they bring down companies from all over Quebec. They bring them down to us for a day. We have them stop at the border at Champlain, tour the facilities, understand how things work at the border, and actually meet some of the personnel who are handling their goods when they cross the border, make those contacts. And then we do a half-day seminar on how to succeed in the U.S. market, and we bring all of that expertise together. And we don't talk to them about sites. It's not about sites. Classic economic development makes the mistake of thinking economic development is real estate. It's not real estate. It's success for business. It's relationships and partnerships. And so that provision of expertise that we bring to them, starting with those workshops, is what makes them successful in the U.S. market. And the way I put it this way: you could go, a Quebec company could go to the biggest accounting firm in Charlotte. How many Quebec customers do you think they have? How much do you think they know about the Quebec tax system and
so
the way
it's the
things...
proximity.
It's proximity, but it's expertise and the fact that we get up every single day and think, how are we going to help Quebec and the U.S. today?
Of course.
It's a level of commitment.
Ben, Mr. Douglas, it's been a pleasure talking to you about this partnership.
My pleasure.
Merci.